This man likes to hide in his wife's feet. The wife didn't understand the purpose of his special hobby, so she could only continue to weave as the man requested, and the man would watch the fast sliding shuttles. He didn't move for months. With perseverance, he finally went from blinking when he saw the shuttle to not blinking at all even when it was moving fast. But he didn't think that was enough. He ordered his wife to boil a pot of boiling water for him and to pour it over the burning coals. The collision of the two things, both of which were hot, caused a lot of hot dust to float into his eyes. Now he can even stand it without blinking. Now all that was left was to practice sleeping with his eyes open, which would mean that he'd mastered the technique and was ready to be taught by Jack the Archer. But when the man went to learn from him, Jack said his powers were still a little weak. Jack snapped a sesame seed out of a cake on the table. With a brush, he quickly wrote several large characters on it. When he was done, he put the brush down and held it out for the man to see. The man, a little confused, crawled over to him. When he looked at it, he was confused. He couldn't see what was written on it, but Jack used his best move at that moment. A white light was emitted. The sesame seeds in his hand were magnified tens of thousands of times. Now he can easily see the words on it. The dumbfounded man could only retreat. He said he'd come back when he learned this trick, but on the way home, the man who didn't know how to practice suddenly found a beggar scratching on the side of the road. So the man thought he could buy the lice on the beggar to go back to practice. When the beggar heard this request, that really happy bad hastily quoted the price of 7 taels of silver for a head of lice. In the end, the man was able to buy the practice tools as he wished. The beggar also solved the problem of food and clothing, by the way. It's the best of both worlds. Only the wife, who was still burning the fire at home, couldn't understand why she had to tie up the lice with her hair. But even though she didn't understand, she listened to her husband. She pinched the louse and let her husband tie it. From then on, the louse was hung in the window of her house. The man stood there staring at the louse. The man stood by the window and stared at the lice. At first, the louse was just the size of an ordinary louse to the man, but as time passes, the seasons change, and the geese flew south. Roy, who was 40 years old, was about to become a master. The little louse grew bigger and bigger in his eyes. At first, it was the size of a mouse to the size of a dog. Then it became the size of a mule, the size of an elephant. But that was still not Roy's goal. He was going to wait until the louse grew to the size of a whale and tie it to a tree outside his house. Now all he had to do was draw his bow and arrow and swish it at the louse. It'll take out the louse's guts with pinpoint accuracy and make sure the louse's head was still attached to its hair. So now that Roy thought he could do it, he approached Jack again and asked to be his student. And this time, Jack didn't say no. He grabbed his bow and came out to teach Roy archery. He wanted to teach Roy how to shoot willow leaves accurately from a distance of 100 meters. And he had to shoot 2 arrows in a row. After completing these basic exercises, he had to put a weight on his arm to aim and shoot. Because the only way to do this, when the arm is still stable with hundreds of pounds of weight on it, then you'll be able to get it right. Roy will be able to draw the bow and shoot 2 arrows at a time, and hit the bullseye with every arrow. Once Roy had mastered the art, Jack only had to teach Roy how to hit the arrows accurately. And Roy had learned all his tricks. Thinking he had nothing left to give to Roy, Jack gave Roy his own bow. Jack said, "You're a good marksman now. You can go now." But Roy left unhappy. He thought Jack only said he was a qualified archer but not the best in the world. Is Jack still the best archer in the world?